What if you could make one change that would completely alter the trajectory of your classroom? A change that would help students take greater ownership over their learning, help increase overall joy factor in your classroom, while also helping make your day-to-day experiences as a teacher more satisfying. And no, I'm not going to say teaching with technology, though that is, of course, part of it. This is the third video in a 6-part series we've put together to teach you tangible steps you can take to engage today's students while building the classroom of tomorrow. In the first video, we discuss why it's so important for us to change our approach to teaching and learning, and why universal design for learning is such a powerful framework for educational transformation. UDL calls on us to cast aside one-size-fits-all education by offering students choice. And in the second video, we showed you a clear step for how you could use choice boards as an easy way to get started. Be sure to watch those videos if you haven't already. The links are in the video description. Just as students learn best in choice-based environments, there's no one right way for you to go about learning how to design learning experiences that meet the needs of all your learners. There is, however, one step you can take that will ensure you've cast aside one-size-fits-all education for good. A step that will all but ensure you're building a classroom designed to achieve the audacious vision of universal design for learning. Educational experiences that are relevant, accessible, and engaging for all learners. What's more, this shift is the single most important thing you can do to help ensure your students are prepared for the future of work and to clearly communicate to students that your class adds value to their lives. The secret? Make creativity the #1 priority in your classroom. Sam, are you saying that if I just get my students doodling every lesson, that's somehow going to transform my classroom? Not quite. Although the word creativity might call up images of painters and musicians, teaching creativity is just as much about teaching a mindset as it is about having students produce creative artifacts, though we will get to that later. Creativity is the key to unlocking deep engagement with learning, ownership of learning, real-world application of learning, student-centric learning, and not to mention 21st century skill development in collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. Creativity gets you all the buzzwords at once. Plus, learning how to be creative is what students want. A recent study revealed that 75% of kids aged 6 to 17 stated that becoming a YouTuber was their #1 most desired career. Don't do it. Just kidding, it's not so bad. That inclination isn't wrong either. Business leaders also report creativity as one of the #1 most desirable skills in future employees. And that's only going to become more true in the age of automation. Teaching creativity means teaching students to think for themselves, to come up with novel solutions to real-world problems, to represent ideas in unique and interesting ways. Traditional education, however, more often than not stifles creativity. Tests, worksheets, and even formulaic essays and projects where students strive to create the same thing are all byproducts of an education system built for the jobs of yesterday. More specifically, the job of an assembly line worker. Our grading system often reinforces this idea by rewarding memorization, following instructions, and creating work that most closely resembles a prototype rather than rewarding work that does something original or new. This contributes to creating an outcomes-based environment where mistakes are bad. They are something to be avoided. When students fear making mistakes, they'll take fewer risks in their work. They may have an innovative idea, but rather secure the safe A than explore a novel solution. This is the opposite of what we want our students doing. It's the opposite of what our future workforce needs. And it also turns out to be the opposite of what most students want to be doing, hence the rising levels of disengagement. Shifting students' attention away from all trying to reach the same exact bar toward coming up with unique solutions to problems and creating one-of-a-kind demonstrations of learning helps them begin to understand that mistakes are necessary for learning, that challenges are opportunities for growth. It also helps them become more self-sufficient and adaptable, skills that are going to be necessary in order for them to thrive in the future of work. This doesn't happen overnight, but I can pretty much promise you that it will never happen in a traditional classroom. What's more, prioritizing variability and original thinking communicates to students that their way of expressing knowledge is valued. When we talk about social emotional skills, a large part of that has to do with a student's sense of belonging. Widening the academic tent by allowing students to express themselves creatively does exactly that. Focusing on developing students' creativity skills helps establish a new lens through which you can evaluate everything about the way you design lessons for students. Here are 3 tips to help you get started. Number one, openly talk about the importance of creativity. You can incorporate the language of creativity into your assessments to help students understand how much you value it. This is an example of a 4-point rubric that I use to assess students' digital books. In this rubric, I included specific language about creativity in each category. It helps encourage them to try new things, add their own unique flair, and to create an end product that actually looks quite different than the end product that their peer created. You can also help students understand the importance of creativity by analyzing creative works that other people have already made. Talk with your students about what makes them interesting. Work together with your students to see if they can backwards plan how that artifact was created. You and your students can even co-create rubrics like the one I just showed you by using an exemplar of a creative project and then having students come up with the different criteria. The second tip is to look for opportunities to redesign activities in order to encourage creative thinking. For example, in this activity, students created digital comics to show what they had learned about a historical period, which in and of itself is, of course, a more creative way of showing understanding than doing something like a test. But to continue to develop their skills in creative expression, I went back and revised the criteria for this project later to encourage them to incorporate elements of humor, just like you would see in a real comic book. So what I'm trying to do is ask students to take some information that's out there in the world and manipulate it and make something unique, something that's their own out of that piece of information. Let's look at another example of how we might redesign an activity to make it more creative. Rather than just asking students to post a text-based response to a question in a program like Padlet, you could have them post an image that represents what they would have written. In this case, you could also give students the option to use the image tool, the GIF tool, or the drawing tool as a way to incorporate even more choice. Then after the students post their images, you could have them interpret what they think their peers' images mean. This adds a layer of digital communication and collaboration to what was once a relatively flat activity when it was just text-based. And the third tip, have students share everything. Sharing work leads to several positive outcomes. One is that it helps students understand that their work is for an authentic audience, which can just inherently make them more invested in what they're doing. Second, it also just helps students learn from each other and they can be inspired to try something new based on what a peer had already done before. And it also just helps elevate and validate the different ways that students show up as learners in your classroom, and in turn helps them feel a greater sense of connection to the community. Here's what I want you to do. Identify an upcoming activity or assessment, ideally one that you think students might find a little bit boring, and then ask yourself, is there a way you can make space to incorporate more creativity? It could be something small, like giving students the opportunity to draw their response to a question rather than write the answer. Or it could be something a little bit more ambitious, like adding a visual component to an upcoming persuasive paper that students are writing. You could have students create a graphic design in a program like Adobe or Canva to try to convince people about their position. And then you could have students put them all in a program like Padlet so that they could see each other's work. Or if you really wanted to go all in, the next time you're doing something like, say, a science experiment, have students also capture footage of that experiment, and then they could edit it down and turn it into an instructional video later that they could showcase for the rest of the school to see. If you want to learn all the ins and outs of what it takes to make creativity front and center in your classroom, then I'd encourage you to add your name to the early bird waitlist for our soon to launch program, 21st Century Teacher. 21st Century Teacher is unlike any other online professional learning you've experienced. You'll get hands-on experience using the instructional strategies and programs that we're teaching. It's experiential learning where you'll have the opportunity to cultivate your own creativity as an instructional designer. Because we're actually getting you in programs in 21st Century Teacher and having you engage with each other, share your work, give feedback, and attend live classes in addition to accessing pre-recorded material, the seats for our program are going to be limited. So if you're interested, you definitely want to get your name on the early bird wait list to make sure you can secure your spot. I hope to see you there. And in the meantime, be on the lookout for the next video in this series where we're going to be looking at how we can take these ambitious ideas and make sure that they are accessible for every single one of our students. That video is either right there right now for you to click on, or it's going to show up in a couple of days. And if you want to check out the previous videos in this video series, then you can find them in the video description below.